So thanks for this high attendance here to the session. It's really nice to see all of you. I hope you can learn something. A little disclaimer, so I'm not going to show you Fiori Elements, because I thought, who comes to UI5con for not coding UI5, right? So you're coming here to learn UI5. So we show you what our framework is doing with UI5 a little bit, in a very simplified way instead. So I hope you will be happy to do that. From the lots of awesome UI5 features which we use here in Fiori Elements, which is, of course, the OData stuff, right? Everything, the whole OData support is really great, and we use it heavily. But I won't show you that. So from all the great things of UI5, I picked 5 things which are fairly new and maybe not so known to the community, because they, I don't know, some of them are you and some of them are maybe only interested if you want to create a framework like Fiori Elements, right? But I hope you find them interesting. They are 5. I have only 45 minutes, so I can only give you a teaser of each of these 5s, you know, what in a very simplified version you can do with it. But then I ask you, if you like that, go to the UI5 documentation in the web and check out more on it. My slides will have the links to the chapters in the Open UI5 documentation. You won't see my demo here. I'm not sure if I can make it available, but so far at least you will have the links to the things that I'm going to present to you. All right? So, and because time is short, let's get started right away. For the sake of demonstrating kind of a miniature Fiori Elements, if you may say, no, I wouldn't go so far. No, but it's just the same thing that we need, and to explain these few features. I created a really simple app. It's kind of a to-do list, you know, the infamous to-do list, but it doesn't look like the one that you find on the internet. It looks like a little bit more like Fiori. Okay. So, and I have already put that here on the screen. So it's really simple. So on the left you have a to-do list. So this guy is going to marry, right? So he has to hire a minister, which is Paul Peterson. He has to rent a beautiful car, and then he has to marry Lisa and later return the car, right? So what you may have seen is that instead of having a free text for my to-do, this is actually structured data in the detail, right? So this task, what you're going to do, is kind of free text, but then it refers to a person, and a person's type has a first name and a last name property, while the car has a brand and a model. And currently in this demo so far we have only 2 types. But you already see we are dealing like we deal in Fiori Elements. We don't know what properties are coming when you connect your data service. So we read the metadata, and then we must do whatever we need to do to make a out-of-the-box UI for you guys and for your customers. So let's have a really quick look at this old-school app. So this is just a hardwired app. None of the awesome features is in there. And so we have an app. You know, the index HTML just loads this one app as the Fiori Launchpad would do it without the Fiori Launchpad. And in here, what we have is a couple of views. So we have the app view, which is just a split app. And it has the detail page is empty, because we only want to populate this one based on routing in the manifest. And the list on the side is the master view. The master view is just a very simple list, just it takes the name and the action, and as one list item, as we can see here. And that's it. And it has a press handler for navigation, so that we see the right context populated on the right side. We have a default view for if you have not chosen any. So let's just get the route away. So it just says, please choose a task in the list. But once we've chosen a route in the routing, so we have the detail view. And again, this is a really, really simple solution to the problem. So it just has, for every type, it has one simple form. Like you can see, one for a car and one for type person, with the appropriate labels and input fields hardwired. And we just switch the visibility, because in our data, we have a property in the detail section, which is type, right? So for a person, it says, this is type person, so we know it's type person. And then using expression binding, which is also another awesome feature, which I'm not going to explain to you, but you don't need a formatter. You just simply write, if it's a person and it becomes a Boolean, and visible expects a Boolean, you get this Boolean. And so that's just how the switch is done. So it's really, really simple, nothing fancy. And you could say, hey, why not? This app works. Why should I change anything? So if we look here, this section that shows details now for this task list. Maybe you also want to create an application that shows you your calendar appointments, which also refer to such details, right? So another app may want to use the same details view that we have here, which is just a form for cars, a form for persons, and so on in another app. So we think about reuse, and this session is a lot about reusing, making functionality available across apps, across controllers, right? So let's do that, okay. One thing we can do, and this is new, instead of using a view, we can completely use a component in the routing. So if we go quickly to the manifest JSON, so here we have the routing section of UI5, it says pattern nothing, we'll go to the default. Pattern records 1, records 2, records 3 will go to the detailed target, and it just points to a view. So this is the new thing now in UI5, and it's called component-based routing. So let's look at it. I switch my sample now to chapter 1, which is the component-based routing chapter. And let's see first the demo of the UI. So I reload. Let's get rid of the route here. So it's the same thing, you know, we have the default view, and the switches are working. So you didn't change anything, Thorsten. No, actually I did, but the app is still working. But let me show you what I did here. So the first, what you see here is the reuse folder. So this could be in a different library. For the sake of simplicity in this demo, it's in the same repo. But typically, you expect the reusable component somewhere else so everybody can reuse it, right? This is a component, because I call it show object. And when you look closely, now the detail view XML is no longer up there in the app. It's part of this component. And the good thing of having a component, so it's exactly the same view, right? I just moved it down. So there are better things to do, which maybe I show you if time is sufficient. And the component JS is pretty simple. It just says, this is my name, and I have a manifest, right? And if we look in the manifest, it has the dependencies that we use for performance, and this is also really important. So that only the detail view uses the simple form, so it needs the layout library of UI5. So I specified no longer in the app this dependency, but just here in the reuse component. And you can see that very visibly if I now go back to the main root, put on the network trace, already put a filter on layout. So if I reload this app, you see there's no artifact with layout here now loaded. So the minute I now really want to show this reuse component, you see the message bundle and the library preload from the layout library. Can you see that here? SAP Fiori layout library preload. So only if the user is actually going to that screen, right? It could be a big app with multiple screens and anything. But maybe most of the time they spend their time on the first list report, but never go to the object page. So why should we load unnecessary UI5 artifacts in that case? And that's one of the reasons why we need components and not views here. So this was basically already the component story that I want to show you, how to use components. So this already took 10 minutes. So I really quickly show you a further separation, because I don't like that the page part, which is actually specific to the app, because the app is the task app, but the details could be used in other apps, right? So this is together. So with chapter 1b, I really separated that a little better. So now in the reuse component, so we are here in the reuse component with the detail view, and it's just the simple forms, the two simple forms that I have created for the two types that we have. And we have yet again a detail view in the app, and this time it only has the page and the parts that are specific to this app. And if you look in the routing, I can show you, I haven't shown you that before for this one, but you see it too. So in this case, I have two things that are affected by our records pattern. If the route goes to records ID, it will load the detail view in the splitter, which we see here, and it will load the detail content as a child. And here you see that we use in the routing type component instead of type view. So I mean, default is if you don't specify anything, it's type view, because it has to be compatible. So if you go to components, suddenly it introduces a type, and UI5 will recognize this is component specific. It points to the name of the reuse component. You give it an ID. You say, okay, it's the child of the detail page and of the control aggregation content, which is the app's detail view. It has the ID detail page, and the aggregation is content. So routing will make sure that the content created in the reuse component ends up here. You don't need to care. It's cool. It's great. So let's go to the next thing. What is really tedious, I mean, imagine someone says we don't need only person and car, we also need other types. So this time, you would need to create this again and again and again and manually type all this. Is this yours or mine?
No, it's not mine.
Ooh.
You have this before.
All right. Okay, sorry about that. I'll just continue. So I would need to calculate that. And you see there's a pattern in it, right? So it's all the properties have a label and an input field. All the types have a form. Why do that? And this is exactly what we are not doing in Fiori Elements. We have to dynamically create these view XMLs because we don't know what are the metadata before we connect it to the app. So let me show you how that works. And this topic is called transformation by using the XML preprocessor. So before the XML view is instantiated with all the controls, it's possible to have a preprocessor running, like a precompiler. You know, if you're old school, you did C when you were young in college, and there was something like precompiler, so you could do things that would not be in the compiled code, but would just help you save you from tedious writing too many lines of code. So we have that in XMLs, in XML views of UI5. So let me show you how that looks. I switch to, now first close that, so surprise, surprise. Chapter 2, and first reload our app. Still looks the same, still acts the same. Well, it seems nothing has changed. Interesting, yeah, cool. Well, but actually something has changed. If I now go to the network trace and I check the detail view of the reuse component, so the lower one is the one of the reuse component, you see suddenly, okay, there's something, it's called template repeat. Okay, let's make this a little bit bigger. Where's that? Let's just use the shortcut. And there's only one form, but there's something like a repeat statement. Oh, okay. I can iterate through something. And so this is the definition of a transformation based on metadata. And I have created a non-public, tiny little Chrome extension which shows you the result of such a transformation. So if we look here at the reuse show object view detail, you see it looks like we had it typed manually before. It's exactly the same thing that we had in the first version, but manually coded, is now the result of this template. It's a view template. So let's have a look into the code. So what you just saw in the debugger is actually that. And what we must have now is some structure that we can read and loop over, right? So I created this types JSON here, which is a really, really simplified metadata description of the data that is used in our data JSON. So in here, so we have, okay, there's a type car, there's a type person, it has the label, and here's an array of the fields. So it has a field property brand and a property model. If you're familiar with OData, this looks like a really simplified JSON-based metadata XML, right? And this is what we use here in this demo. So because that is assigned here in the component JS, so there's a little view factory. So this time, it's not just a static view in the component. So we have to override components create content method. This is the typical thing that you do to say, well, I want to calculate or transform. I do provide the view on my own. So you don't read it as a static view. I do something, right? And in our case, we just use the XML view factory, so the new create method to support async view loading. And here we can just simply say, I want to use a preprocessor. And we use the built-in, out-of-the-box XML preprocessor of UI5. But we have to say, okay, what should it transform on? What is it? So, and we give it the metadata. So in the case of this demo, we just load the types, which I have specified as a data source in the app descriptor. So it's there. It's just a JSON model, as you just seen here. And in the detail view, we have then the arrays. Go over all types, yeah? And for every iteration, put one in type. So this type is actually the metadata type per iteration. So in the first part, it will be the object for car. In the second part, it will be the type description for person. And then we take the label of the type, put it to the title of the form, and then we iterate over the fields. And for every field, we will create one input field and one input field, one label and one input field with a property binding. So for the input field, what you see here in line 14, and if we go back to our tool, results in brand in line 8, in model in line 10, 16 first name, 18 last name. You get the idea. But if we want to create such something like a binding, of course, and here we just use expression binding again, but during preprocessing, not during runtime. So it's just a simple concatenation. If you do more complex things, use a formatter function so you have a better overview of your code. But if it's just these three concats here, curly brace open, name of the field, curly brace close, which you can easily see here, right? I mean, you don't need a formatter function. You can just type that in as expression binding. So this transformation runs before the UI is instantiated. I'm worrying about the sound, so let's try again. Okay, so you got the idea? So let's see how this is actually working. Let's close this real quickly. I have created a alternative types. So I put here some new types, overwrite the old type section, and then I also have alternative data, which I put in the data JSON for the app. And I always have to make sure I save. Did I save here? Dates, types, yeah, I save. So let's reload. Yeah. Okay, so we have hire. It's still, he wants to get the minister for the marriage. He wants to rent the car. Now oh no, he's no longer marrying. He runs away to Brazil. So second thoughts, maybe. So you see, I have created a new type location, which has the properties country and place. Right. So and you find it here in my type specification. So car and person was the only one before. Now we have location. We didn't have to change a single thing in our view template, right? I have to stay here, right, for the camera. Hey, sorry. And that's a good thing, right? So if our business model is enriched, if the business developers say we have some new fields in our data, you just get them on the UI. It's cool. What you also can do is, if you say the UX designer come to you and say this doesn't look good anymore, right? So you can just adjust the template once. So you maybe say we need to know that this label was presented at the UI5con. So let's put that in here, UI5con based label colon, right? So let's save this, reload, and suddenly all our types here say that they were presented on UI5con. Isn't that awesome? Oh, okay, something's coming. So this was templating. So, but some of you guys may say, hey, these types and our view template, they don't change so often, right? How often do they change? And that's right, that's true. We don't expect the data model to change so often. We don't expect the definitions of the UX designers to change so often. So should we do the transformation every time the app gets started? No. And also UI5 has an answer for that. Look at that. We have XML View Cache. So let's move to the XML View Cache. Do a quick cleanup here of the things that I changed. So you will not see the runaway bride anymore, or runaway groom in that case. So it will be still the wedding. And we go to chapter 3. So we reload. Again, this is really boring. Then nothing ever changes in this UI, right? So what is going on here? Why am I telling you this? because it's about reuse, about making things reusable. So this time, what I'm going to show you is the view cache. So it's hard because you don't see it. It just runs a little bit better. It's a little bit faster because no transformation is happening. How can I show that to you? So let me change a type a little bit. So the type, let's say a first name is old school. Let's call it given name. Okay, let's see. Yeah. Oh, that worked. Okay, given name. So nice. Okay, and now let's also put our, we really want to see that these are labels from the UI5con. So let's do the UI5con label. And let's see. Okay, we reload. Oh, nothing is happening. Why? Why? Because we didn't invalidate the cache. So the very simplified cache invalidation mechanism here was the whole stringified version of the types. That's why it worked. But for if the view, if the design has changed, what I actually would do is that I take my manifest of my reusable component and I increase the version. So it's now version 0101. No, it's 101. Come on, it's 101. So after I changed that version and saved, let's see. Oh, now it's there because the view cache invalidation was fired and the transformation happened. So that's the thing about the view cache. Now you want to know how to invoke it. So let's quickly go to the component.js. So there's only one line I added when it comes to the XML View Create factory. And this is this line 18, cache. You just have to provide what are your keys, under what keys should the transformed XML be saved. And if these keys are changing, we will retransform. We do the transformation, actually. If they don't change, we don't do the transformation. It's as simple as that. And here my very, probably not, don't do this as home variation of view cache invalidation is here. Get the data of the type model, stringify it, and make it base 64 is one part of the key. And the other part of the key is I read the manifest, I go to the version, and put that as the second part of the key. So it's also really a really simple example. But this is how we can invoke, in a very simplified manner the view cache. So on all the pages, I skipped that before, I have this really brief snippet, what was this about, why we use it in Fiori Elements, and then the link to the UI5 documentation. I'm sorry, I don't have questions, Silke. We have to do that later, or if I finish early enough, we can do that. So let's go to the next chapter. So we already saw 3 awesome features. Now go to declarative event handlers. So we stick to the PowerPoint a little bit here. And in the PowerPoint, I guess by now you understand that most of our thinking as Fiori Elements framework developers and architects is thinking declaratively, thinking XML views. Because this is the one that we create through transformations. We don't create JavaScript code out of the box. We don't do any transpiling or anything like that. So the only way to understand what are the properties, what are the structures, is we put them into the XML through transformation. If it comes to event handling, if you have a button and a press handler and so on, the normal UI5 programming model would say somewhere in your controller you have an event handler, and how can I do that? Zeiger options, laser pointer. So you have the event handler here. And it has always the same API. You get this OEvent object, which is an API that allows you to access what was the source of the event, what were the parameters of the event. You can, through the source control, get to the data that was attached, the context binding, the bound data that we had. And of course, in a controller for a particular view, for a particular service, the programmer knows all that. He knows that the property name is first name. But we don't know that. So we cannot do that. What can we do instead? So luckily, with 156, UI5 allows us now to, as a press handler, it doesn't have to be a press handler anymore, but right in the XML, I can use any function, have my parenthesis, and use data binding to directly point to a property in the XML view. So if my service would have a property, in the line of the table that I'm referring to, or somewhere in a form field.
This is the loudspeaker, it's not you.
Oh, it's not me. Okay, that's good. So it's not on the recording, so that's good.
No, it's not.
Only you have to suffer, sorry. So if this is a property of the actual service, then when the event is fired, UI5 will get the current value of that property before calling the function. That's cool. So you can write functions that don't need to know the data structure anymore, that just fulfill a functional purpose. This function is for that or that, and you just give it the right data in the XML view. And I mean, maybe in a regular app you won't need that, but we cannot live without it in Fiori Elements because we don't know the data structure. So let me show you how that works. Let's go back to our examples. Chapter 4. And let's make sure that I clean up. And so look at the UI first. Whoa, finally! There's something new in the UI. We have a task list, of course. So it would be interesting to say that we have performed the task, that we are done with the task. Or maybe, so this indicates now the green is not so visible here, right? So maybe we have to talk to Fiori 3 to make the semantic color a little bit more present. But the done, and the set open, oh no, this was by mistake, so I want to reset it to open, right? So we can just do that here, go to any of the lines and set the task to done, and you will only see it reflected in the list here. So this is what was given to us by UX. Even we told us, hey, if it would be a checkbox, it would be much easier because we can use two-way binding. No, you have to use a button. Okay, sorry. And the button doesn't have a value to carry the two-way binding, so we need to solve that problem. So in order to solve that problem, what I show you now, and let's declutter this a bit, is so we created a reusable function. So this is not related to our component. This is a static class, part of our reuse project, of a reuse library, and it has now a set property function because this is basically what we want to do. For any context, we can set a property of any name. So it's like the model set property function, only it doesn't need to know, it doesn't have an instance, doesn't need to have an instance of a model. It will just take the context that you give it, right? So by offering this function, what we can do now, and we do that in the apps detail view, we have a header content for our page where we have these buttons. We can now use the press handler. So the upper one is the set to done, the lower one is the set to open. And we can just call this function, reuse util set property. The UI5 offers us some pre-filled objects like a managed object model to the button. So $source is what you would get with O-event get source. Is ready for you to be used as $source. And then I can immediately get the infamous get binding context function. And so I'm sure that before my function is invoked, it will get the right context object. And because I don't know the structure of the context, I give it the name of the property, which is the done property of my model. And I have the value true for the done button and the value false for the open button. Really simple. Let's look at my data JSON again, because I think I didn't show that in the beginning. In between, just for this chapter, I created a done property. So now all the tasks have a done property, which was not there before, but should have been, because how would you use a task list if you don't have that? Anyway, so you saw that, and you saw the detail view, and let's just quickly go to the debugger for that one. Put a breakpoint here in this util function, line 6, and we see this is not part of any controller. It's just a static reusable class that can be used by anyone. And where's the UI? Here. So I click set to done. I end up here. It gives the model. So I see in the model the records pass. I'm at the record 0. I have the name, my static name done, and I have value. Hold on, where is it? Value true, because I was there. So let's stop that. Let's switch. Whoops. Let's switch to number 4. So it's record /3. Same thing here, set to done. It's the context. Because as I get context already in the XML view before the function is called, it gets me the right context. I get the name, I get the value, and I can use my typical model binding in a generic model setup call in a generic fashion. All right, that's cool. Isn't that awesome? It's good. Maybe you don't want to use it all the time, but I mean, if some of you are working for consultant companies, maybe you want to have a set of reusable functions that you can always apply. And maybe they are simple enough that they can really be static, like this one. Okay. But as we are SAP, what's about the enterprise qualities that we always have? And where one of the most appreciated ones by SAP customers is probably extensibility. So if we offer such reusable functions, maybe the app that is consuming that function, or at the customer in an extension project, someone wants to have an on before done, on before set done, right? Because they want to veto. They want to veto what is happening here for certain cases which are application specific. And we can do that because luckily UI5 offers the controller extensions now. And this is really a great thing. It allows you to define reusable things that plug into controllers. So it's not a standalone static class. It lives within a controller. And you can read all about it in the UI5 doc. Me, myself, instead, I will simply show you yet another chapter of this one, of our of our quite simple demo app. Oh, let's get rid of these. And maybe because I failed very often here, let's make it a little bit smaller. Reload. So the task app said, no, I'm not happy with this set open, set done, because the reopening is a rare case, and I want to be sure that the user doesn't do that by mistake. Okay, so let's see if that works. So I married her. No, actually, I was streaming. I didn't marry her yet. So let's set it to open. Whoa, where's that coming from? There's a confirmation dialog suddenly in here. Do you really want to reopen the to-do? Oh, yes, because I did that. So I click the yes button. It's back to open. Let's put it to done again. Let's try it again. Set to open. Do you really want to open the to-do? No. I don't want to. I'm really married. It was not a dream. It was like a dream, but not a dream. Done. It stays. Awesome, right? So let me show you how that is done. So there is a little bit more to read in the documentation. So by just looking at the code, it will be overwhelming, but let's try it anyway. Now in our reuse section, you see there's now a new folder that I called controller extensions, and I gave this class the utils name, but it's not that util with the lower caps, it's the util with a capital. And the UI5 convention says classes that are done to create, use the new operator to create actually memory have the uppercase, while statics have lowercase. So you can see it's really different. But if you look inside, of course, you see it. So the cool thing about controller extension, you can specify what are usable methods by putting them to public, or what are final. You cannot override them. You cannot further extend them. By using this metadata methods, we have a setDone method. It's public, but it's final. You cannot do anything. You have to eat setDone as it is. But you can also define hooks, right? So I define a hook before setDone, which is actually also a JavaScript function. I say this is public available, and it allows overriding. So they have a whole enumeration of that, but I just use the instead, which would replace the default implementation of this hook, right? With a custom implementation. So, and if we go to our setDone function, the only thing it does is, before it actually sets the value, it will call this before setDone, and this is asynchronous, of course, because there's a dialog that we have to wait for the user, eventually, if anybody wants that. And once the promise is resolved, we just pass the value with our original util set property that we have created in the last chapter. So the before setDone, it's nice because you can give the hook an actual API, you can specify the params and so on with JSDoc and everything, put it into a nice and shiny documentation. And the default implementation is just a pass-through. So whatever value comes in, you just pass it through and it goes out. So how is this used? So this time, we actually created a controller for the detail page of the app. We are back at the app. It's hard to follow, I know. But we have not enough time to make that better. I'm so sorry. So you're back in the app. And let me quickly comment this section because it's not relevant now. This is just using a controller extension. So this is an actual controller. You see the infamous controller extend here. And now you say one segment of my controller is using util, and util is in my dependencies here the controller extension that I just shown you before, which offers the set done and the before hook, right? So if I don't do anything, if I just want to reuse that functionality and I'm happy, so let's refresh my simple app again. Let's select one, set to done, set to open, set to done. This is the last line now, set to open. You can see the change? So no pop-up. So this app doesn't care, no. But now the PO comes and says, no, we really have to make sure that there are no accidentals opens. Please make a message box. So this is why the controller extensions come with this override method. It takes a map where you can override the functions that are supposed to be overwritten. Not all of the functions, We want to have this in a controlled manner. Whoever creates a controller extension says, yeah, we start slow, we just offer this property, but then maybe customer feedback comes, it would be good to have a hook. So we can introduce that hook later, we can document the hook later, and now the apps can actually use this hook, right? So in this case, we have provided the hook already, and now we implement it. So because we looked at the documentation of the hook, we know we have to return a promise. In the promise, we get the value, and true means set to done, false means set to open, of course. So if it's false, only then we will create the message box to allow the user to influence this decision, or we just pass the true value through, right? So this could be also hardwired to true and false. Again, this is a very, very simple example, and it should just inspire you to do a lot of really great stuff here, right? So now after I uncommented, so save it, reload, and what you already seen, oh man, always this replace on TV. Now we get the confirmation dialog again. So this is really just a glimpse of so much what you can do, right? With all the awesome features in UI5. And if we let me just go back to what you've seen. Let's just recap that. We saw component-based routing, right? We want to have reusable parts of full screens, right? Like micro front ends. And we want to wrap them nicely, and we want to have some dynamics in there, reusable by different apps. Go to components, use the component-based routing if you want to do that. We've seen transformation using XML preprocessors. Well, I hope no one of you guys is doing that, because then we don't sell Fiori Elements anymore, right? So this should be us. But it's open UI5. So none of the things that I've shown you is SAP UI5. All of it is open UI5. So even if you do non-SAP stuff, you can use that. So if in non-SAP, non-OData project somewhere out there, you see, well, this kind of dynamic view creation is helpful. Go with the XML View Processor. And the guys who know Chrome Headless or Phantom, right? We are not limited to do that at runtime. You could create design time tools with that view engine if you want. If you don't want to use something higher sophisticated for creating dynamically XML. But if you want to stick with UI5 because you understand how UI5 works with the bindings and so on, maybe you want to have a scaffolding generator you attach to whatever your service description is or your type specification, whatever metadata you have, and you would just have an engine that creates you this XML views and persisted them in the project instead of doing it at runtime. So you don't need a cache, it's then hard in the project. So you can all do that, it's just an inspiration. No one tells you to use it, right? We use it in Fiori Elements, right? View cache, so if you do it at runtime, we don't want to do it all the time. So view cache makes sense. We only do it if significant things have changed so that we need to do the transformation. Declarative event handlers, if you want to have static or reusable controller function, doesn't matter. We now have the parenthesis, runde Klammer auf, runde Klammer zu, parenthesis open, close, and right in the XML, we can specify properties, statics, and everything for event handlers. And we don't need to use the O-event, get source, O-event, get parameters inside of our functions. So we can save a lot of code because very often we just do wrappers around reusable functions in the controller, which don't have a lot of own code. They just need to do the infamous get source, get parameters, right? So we save code here. Controller extensions. If you intend to allow for your reusable functionality or for your apps to be extended by someone else, for us this is of course, right, we deliver the app. Already in SAP, an industry-specific solution may want to have an extension for a particular thing that doesn't fit to the standard. Then a consultant partner may want to take a standard app and puts an extension in there. So they don't want to place additional fields on. They maybe want to interfere also with the functional aspects of the app. And there's where it's good to have controller extensions, and that we in Fiori Elements need to offer this controller extension with dedicated hooks, so you guys can, in the extensibility, override these hooks and do whatever the customer really wants on a functional basis. Well, again, all the sections, this will be on the UI5con page, will have the links. Let's click at least once on one, but I guess I have to go back to my, where is it? Cycle options. Yeah. So using controller extensions. This is, well, okay, I missed it. I used SAP UI5, but actually Open UI5. So I have to change the PowerPoint, but it's the same thing. It's Open UI5. Trust me. That's that. And I have made it in time.
Will you take some questions, or?
I mean, I can take. I mean, you tell me when to stop because you are.
Well, you
the
still have
facilitator.
4 minutes.
4 minutes.
So
Oh, okay. Good.
You had a question?
Yeah. Well, it was nothing really complicated. I was just wondering why in your data all the field count are always 2, and I was then wondering what happens if a third field would come, would that invalidate the view cache? Because all of these to-do tasks have just one label and one input field, so I was just wondering what happens if we change the number there.
I mean, because we have some time left.
Thank you.
Let's satisfy this question. So reload, so what is this, the car? Okay, the car. Go to our infamous, where's my reuse? Hold on. Reuse. This is my reuse component that has the metadata definition. We have cars. So who is a car fan? What else should I add to my car?
Horsepower.
Horsepower. Oh, no, okay, this is the technical name, so let's make this camel case and say horsepower. And so let's also adapt the data real quick that we actually see something. So what does a Phantom has? It has a lot, right? I think so. Rolls-Royce Phantom, this must be something meaningful. So let's say horse 30. Well, the one from 1930 maybe. So let's say 30. What is English? HPM? No. HPP? Only one HP. Okay, so let's try. Okay. Yes! Horsepower. Thanks, Silke.
Woo!
Awesome.
Isn't it?
Okay, we have another question.
So in this XML predefined view, how would you handle, just briefly, different types of fields? So that now it's all input variables, but if you need a combo box or a date picker, so if you truly want to make it a little bit more powerful.
That's a good question, because this is, you know, when we started with the concept, I'm one of the inventors of the whole idea, right, doing that. You know, everybody was using handlebars to create HTML, and I thought, okay, we have XML views, why not using a transformation engine to create XML views? And the honest answer is you have to understand what you're doing here, right? So you take the API of the control, you first make it a static one, so you see, okay, this is how it would look if I would manually write that. And then you see what are the variables that I want to change during templating in the transformation before runtime, which are actually, you know, they are stored in the view cache. So the outcome is like you have manually written it. But you, I mean, as you see, so if the original Fiori Elements templates were so easy and you could tell everybody how that is. But as always, you know, Stakeholders come, we want these features, and we want that features. And if there's coffee on the table, it should become red. Okay, so now our templates are really, really huge. And we can use fragments. You can modularize them with XML fragments, which helps a little bit. But we are actually also working on a new thing which comes up next year. We call them macros, which are reusable snippets of the things we build Fiori Elements upon. So if you're only interested of some parts that we have on the object page, like one of the tables or one of the forms, we will have something, but it will be for the preprocessor, that the preprocessor understands. They don't exist at runtime anymore, but they are reusable preprocessing snippets that you can use for things that we typically only have in the big Fiori Elements, and you can create hybrid applications, but you have to wait until next year. But as again, about the complexity, it gets complex, but this is the work we are doing. But in the framework, so that the app developer doesn't need to worry, right?
Okay, we have to stop now. If you have any more questions, will you be available afterwards?
I'm out there. I mean, it's difficult to find me because I have this common hairstyle and so on. And so, but if you see me around and you have questions, please come by. I'm happy to talk to you.
Thanks very much. And here's a little present.